Good morning and welcome to All Souls. I'm Don Dickey, a member of the congregation, also the chairman and secretary of the worship team. We are delighted that you are here with us in person today, and we would love it if you would check in on your social media to let others know you have joined us here. And then, if you would take a moment to silence your phone for the rest of the service. The isolation of the COVID pandemic has been difficult for all of us. As we rejoice in again meeting in person, let me remind you of a few precautions that will help keep us safe. We are asking everyone to have your vaccination record verified in our database, to wear a properly fitting mask while you are inside, and not to eat or drink in the building. Be aware that there are exits on both sides of the stage and also at the back of Bragg Auditorium where you entered. Our services are broadcast on YouTube, including images of the congregation, with the exception of the chairs seated directly in front of the tech booths. Past services are archived on YouTube for viewing at your convenience. Assisted listening devices and other accessibility accommodations are available. Ask the ushers if you need these. Those who cannot yet be vaccinated by reason of age are invited to enter the building through the decorated arch from the patio into Conover Hall, where they will gather and be escorted into the service together with their teachers. Let us enter into a time of reflection, renewal, and fellowship together. Let us begin by extending a very warm welcome to those joining us online for this morning's service with the big wave of your hand. Welcome, everyone.
Do you want me? Ah ha ha! All right. Okay. Just in case you folks at home hadn't figured it out, we had some sound problems, so we're hoping that you can hear us now. And we say again, good morning. And welcome once again to this gathering of mind and heart. And I now have more mics than I need up here. That's what it sounds like. Okay, thank you. All right, now, better? Yes, okay. So welcome once again to this gathering of mind and heart, of conscience and questions, and the pursuit of larger life in community. Welcome to this place of paradox, where we acknowledge the worst of what we do to each other as humans and still affirm the people we want to be and the world we hope to build together. As we begin this hour of renewal and reflection, let us call to mind these words of minister and teacher Russell Bletzer, who said, "We are summoned to search our hearts in the earnest quest for deeper self-knowledge and greater awareness of the world. How do we remove the obstacles to love that hinder us from reaching the fullest connection with our fellow beings? To love as we ought to, as we need to, we must begin with ourselves, facing our own failures and imperfections in humility, but without contempt, renewing our ideals in acceptance and forgiveness. How do we cleanse our hearts of bitterness, of fear, of cynicism, and of all the poisonous tensions that separate us from one another? To free ourselves from this bondage, we must arise in the dignity of self-realization and mutual confidence, to see our neighbors and all the earth's kin creatures so much like ourselves and so much in need of one another. This is why we assemble here for this hour, set apart from both the business and the pleasures of our days, to confront our despair, to face the darkness of our times openly and with compassion, to tell the truth and find our courage, to remember our aspirations, to gather our power for the lives we choose to lead together. In affirmation of this imperative, we kindle our flaming chalice, light of a free faith, of an awakened conscience, of a generous community. May it burn in our hearts and minds and spirits, today and always. In its light, may we choose lives of justice and peace, honesty and kindness, courage and wholeness and love.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Isaac, and I light this chalice for the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large.
Thank you. Will you join me in speaking once again together the words of our covenant promise? Goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law.
Good morning. My name is Anthony Edwards, and I'm the Director of Music and Worship Arts and Turning On and Off Things. So I turned it off and I turned it back on. I don't, that's all you can do. You call the people at the help desk and they say, "Is your computer plugged in?" It was. I want to remind us all in the room that we're here today, and I want to say thank you for being here, but I want to remind us that singing is still a dangerous sport. So it expels too much aerosol, and we want to keep each other safe, so we're inviting you here in the room to hum along with us this morning. Hum as much as you want and as often as you want, and the words will be on the screen to remind us what our intentions are with our humming. If you're at home and you're watching this live on YouTube or later on YouTube, I say sing at the top of your lungs until your partner tells you to stop. We're going to start today with We'll Build the Land, and we're going to start with the chorus, and we're just going to hum the chorus so that we all feel together and can feel that singing together feeling, and the singers will then launch into the words, and you can keep humming, please. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where people together, anointed by wisdom, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born.
Come, build a land where people together, anointed by wisdom, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll be a land building up ancient cities, raising up devastations from old, restoring ruins of generations. Oh, we'll build a land of people so bold. Come, build a land where people together, anointed by wisdom, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
Hi there, guys in the front row. Can you tell me what season this is right now? Fall, right, got it in one. And fall is a great time for poetry. So I thought I would share a couple of my favorite fall poems with you this morning. The first one is by Edna St. Vincent Millay, and she's thinking about what is the rose thinking, the rose that's been growing all summer in the garden and blooming. As the leaves start to fall and things get colder, what's the rose remembering? She says, now the autumn shudders in the rose's root. Far and wide the ladders lean among the fruit. Now the autumn clambers up the trellised frame, and the rose remembers the dust from which it came. Brighter than a blossom on the rose's bough sits the wizened orange bitter berry now. Beauty never slumbers, all is in her name, but the rose remembers the dust from which it came. And then Robert Frost talks about November as being the companion of his sorrow. And he pictures November as a woman. He says, my sorrow, when she's here with me, thinks these dark days of autumn rain are beautiful as days can be. She loves the bare, the withered tree. She walks the sodden pasture lane. Her pleasure will not let me stay. She talks, and I am fain to list. She's glad the birds are gone away. She's glad her simple worsted gray is silver now with clinging mist. The desolate, deserted trees, the faded earth, the heavy sky, the beauty she so truly sees, she thinks I have no eyes for these, and vexes me for reason why. Not yesterday I learned to know the love of bare November days before the coming of the snow, but it were vain to tell her so, and they are better for her praise. And then finally, Phyllis McGinley talks about November like she might be a maiden aunt, someone who is very no-nonsense. She says, away with the vanities of man. Now comes to visit here the maiden aunt, the Puritan, the spinster of the year. She likes a world that's furnished plain, a sky that's clean and bare, and garments eminently sane for her consistent wear. Let others deck them as they please in frills and furbelows. She scorns alike the fripperies of flowers and of snow. Her very speech is shrewd and slight, with innuendo done, and all of her is hard, thin light, or shadow sharp as sun. Indifferent to the drifting leaf and innocent of guile, she scarcely knows there dwells a brief enchantment in her smile. So love her with a sparing love that is her private fashion, who fears the august ardor of a demonstrated passion. Yet love her somewhat, it is meet, and for our own defense, after October, to find sweet her chilly common sense. So those are some ways that the poets have talked about fall, and I hope you'll enjoy some poetry this fall as well. Now we'll say goodbye to the children and let them go off.
Go now in peace, may love guide all your ways. Beauty be the blessings of your nights and days. Truth on your lips and kindness in your deeds. faith to follow where the human spirit leads.
Blessed are those who take seriously the bonds of community, who know that the work of the church is the transformation of society, and who do not shrink from controversy, sacrifice, or change. Blessed are those who support the church and its work with their regular, sustained, and generous giving. In this spirit, our offering for this morning will now be given and gratefully received. Will you join me now in the words of dedication for our offering? We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
Good morning. The Reverend Aisha Ansano is the affiliate community minister of First Parish in Malden, Mass, and a member of Black Lives, UU. White people tend to be visitors to the struggle for racial justice, ones that aren't forced to be there but can choose to come in and leave whenever they like. People of color reside in the struggle for racial justice by virtue of their race. As people who are constantly in the struggle, people of color have the right to make claims on what they find okay and not okay, what they see as helpful and not helpful. Think about it in terms of this metaphor. You're visiting a foreign country where the customs are very different from what you're used to, and the language is different, and some of the things that they do are not only different, but make you feel deeply uncomfortable. As a guest in that country, it is not for you to say that those things that people who live there are doing are wrong. Instead, your role is to learn, to pay attention, to try to understand how things work, and to adapt. But if you do something that goes against the norms, it's also your role as a guest to not insist that they let you do things however you want to do them. It is your role as a guest to pause and to consider what you are doing.
We think we have to choose, let me start again. We think we have to change all those things that are happening out there, and that change can happen as a direct result of our actions. And sometimes this is true, especially in the area of social change, where we need to be very intentionally to build momentum to create more just conditions. But more often, I'm learning, true change happens only when we take the time and the risk of sitting with something hard. True change in the world is intimately related to our internal transformation, which is intimately related to our presence to ourselves. Culture is simply everything that's around us. At some point in our lives, we learn that there are other ways of being. Our human tendency is to think that ours is better than theirs. When we are white, thinking that ours is better is supported by the fact that our social and political systems have been built through the same frame through which we are looking. We learn that our way is the right way and the best way. Simply put, this is the white supremacy culture.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing in my soul.
In a tongue-in-cheek list of imaginary creatures, Woody Allen once described the great roe, a mythological beast with the head of a lion and the body of a lion, though not the same lion. I'm starting to think about dealing with racism in America as an example of a great roe, which involves trauma for people racialized as not white, and trauma for people racialized as white, though not the same trauma. In his book, My Grandmother's Hands, author, artist, and psychotherapist Resmaa Menakem explains trauma this way. The body is where we live, he says. It's where we fear, hope, and relax. And what the body most cares about are safety and survival. When something happens to the body that is too much, too fast, or too soon, it overwhelms the body and can create trauma. We can have a trauma response to anything, he continues, anything we perceive as a threat, not only to our physical safety, but to what we do, say, think, care about, believe in, or yearn for. From the body's point of view, safety and danger are neither situational nor based on cognitive feelings. Rather, they are physical, visceral sensations. The body either has a sense of safety or it doesn't. If it doesn't, it will do almost anything to establish or recover that sense of safety. The body's response to trauma is involuntary, in other words, not rational or intentional, and it can become a trap from which the survivor is never free to find wholeness again, a trap of unsafeness that is even passed from one generation to the next. 21st century American society is just beginning to recognize the ways in which Black cultures and families and Black bodies in this country continue to carry the encoded traumas of slavery and Jim Crow, of lynchings and community burnings and segregation, of legal and political and economic systems that have functioned to subjugate everyone identified as other than white. This inherited generalized trauma forms a baseline onto which is added the personal experiences of race-based violence, aggression, and disparity that continue to create trauma in the lives of people of color today. Please notice that the call to get over it, or the reminder that that was a long time ago, does nothing to heal the trauma response encoded in the body. As Menakem says, the body either has a sense of safety or it doesn't. I cannot imagine how, if I carried the legacy of ancestral trauma compounded by the cultural trauma of racism in this current society, topped off by a steady stream of both deliberate and ignorant direct racialized microaggressions, my body would ever have a sense of visceral safety. And if my body ever did find spaces where it felt more safe and relaxed, at home among family, or in my own neighborhood surrounded by people who look like me, or at church, perhaps. Why would I ever trade any of that for more time out in the dominant culture where I am constantly braced for harm at every turn? What I know from my own experience of living in a female body is that I carry deeply the secondary trauma of sexual assault that I have heard about, as well as the generational trauma of a patriarchal culture, reinforced by an assortment of icky jokes, unwanted touches, and sexualized comments that I have personally experienced. There are many situations, both public and not public enough, in which my body does not feel safe, no matter what my brain thinks about it. I get that part, and I get that non-white racial trauma is real. But now consider for a moment what Menachem says about the sources of perceived threat, not only to our physical safety, but to what we do and say and think and care about and believe in and yearn for. I can't help thinking that for many white enculturated people, having the fundamental truth and rightness of the history and the way of life we have always believed in called into scornful question has felt profoundly threatening to what we do, say, think, care about, believe in, and yearn for, has been, in its own way, traumatizing. And as Menachem suggests, when the body doesn't have a visceral sense of safety, it will do almost anything to establish or recover that sense of safety. The desperate intensity of opposition to Black Lives Matter and critical race theory seems like it must come from a place more primal than disagreement over political or historical theory. Now, let us be clear that a cherished belief does not have to be true in order for having it challenged to feel threatening and trauma-inducing. In fact, I wonder whether it may be that the more convincing the challenge, the more intensely the threat is felt, and the more physically the body reacts. I think all the way back to the pictures of the white adults screaming violent abuse at little black Ruby Bridges on her way to first grade. That child obviously posed no physical threat to anyone in that crowd of adults, and yet their bodies and faces in the photographs are contorted with rage and fear. Those same postures and expressions can be seen in many photographs throughout the ensuing decades, right down to the insurrectionists on January 6th and the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse to this very day. However, it is much too easy to attribute this overt, visible resistance to what we have long named as hate. And indeed, from the outside, it looks and feels hateful. Yet the perpetrators consistently claim that I don't hate anybody. I'm just defending my country and my way of life. And I wonder if, from within their own visceral embodied experience, they are not, in fact, responding out of the trauma of having that national self-understanding and cultural expectation called into question in what feels like a personally threatening way. Now, hear this clearly. I'm not saying that carriers of white supremacy culture are being threatened in the same way as people of color in this country, or that their trauma is equivalent. Remember, head of a lion, body of a lion, but not the same lion. And yet there are two important moves that we might be able to make if we can bring ourselves to apply what we know about trauma response to understanding the reaction in dominant white culture as it confronts the demand to dismantle racial privilege. First, we white liberals who want to choose to be on the right side of history, we who believe in freedom, might get better at talking with the resistors who are so angry. The principles of trauma-informed care teach would-be caregivers not to ask, "What is wrong with you?" but rather, "What happened to you?" For people stuck in the trap of trauma response, the opportunity to tell their story is a way of externalizing the injury and becoming able to reflect on it rather than continuing to embody it. When someone's body is screaming at them that they are not safe, there is never any good achieved by telling them that they are stupid. Neither misinformation nor bad logic can be recognized by the lizard brain that takes over in situations of perceived danger. Menachem writes, "Our lizard brain cannot think. It is reflexively protective, and it is strong. It loves whatever it feels will keep us safe, and it fears and hates whatever it feels will do us harm." The second and more significant insight that trauma awareness might offer in the context of dismantling racism is the potential to understand our own struggles as liberals more helpfully. Just because we are intellectually assured that equality and justice are correct ethical principles and good ideas does not mean that our bodies are magically freed from the racial trauma of our history and society. Remember, trauma lives in our bodies, not in the situations we encounter or in our cognitive processes. We who believe in freedom are not actually free until we have noticed our own flesh and blood recoil from the threat of not finding our white identity and experience as the default center of our common culture. When this happens, in many ways, we often go to pieces. We get defensive and resent being made to feel guilty. We cry and expect to be comforted. We object to the ways in which the demands for greater justice are presented, the timing, the tone, even the grammar. We want to explain why other people's experience wasn't what they thought it was, and how much credit we ought to be given for our good intentions, even when their impact ended up being harmful. We are also prone to drop out of the conversation, both as institutions and as individuals, whenever our discomfort is triggered, and turn our attention elsewhere because we can. As Menachem says, our threatened bodies will do almost anything to establish or recover that former sense of safety. We are doing something very counterintuitive when we try to push through that floundering retreat toward comfort and lean into the vision of a different kind of community and culture from what we have been used to. We are trying to override the lizard brain as it seeks to protect our comfort in the service of something better that we have not yet experienced, which is why we are more likely to succeed if we undertake the attempt together with others, rather than trying to make ourselves feel safe all by ourselves, an effort which rarely accomplishes anything. Which brings us to the current effort in the National Unitarian Universalist Association to add an 8th principle to our familiar list of 7. What the proposed 8th principle says is this: we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. More than 100 individual congregations within the UUA have voted to add the 8th principle to their own church covenant, and many more are actively engaged in the process of considering it. Black Lives of UU, an organization of people of color within Unitarian Universalism, is one of the organizing sponsors of this effort. And they have chosen to wait to introduce it as a formal motion at a General Assembly until a critical mass of congregations has had an opportunity to study its implications. We here at All Souls will need to decide whether we would choose to join the coalition and add this statement to our own understanding of what it means for us to be a UU congregation. Personally, I hope we might both undertake that conversation and eventually agree to this addition, following a thorough and inclusive process. For the moment, let me say 2 things that we should bear in mind for that discussion. First, the principles and purposes as we have them today are some 40 years old and were never meant to be an immutable statement. From their first presentation, it was intended that they should be reconsidered and amended on a regular basis. Indeed, I think those of us who initially passed them have been both pleased and somewhat shocked at their durability over time. Nevertheless, adding to them as our movement evolves is entirely within the spirit by which they were created, and perhaps even overdue. Second, the specific language of journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions was crafted and proposed by communities of color within our movement. It might not be exactly what you or I would have written, but it captures both vocabulary and spirit significant to those communities, such that seeking to re-wordsmith it would not be helpful. We must consider the existing proposal on its merits so that all congregations are working with the same statement. Some participants in these discussions around the association have objected that everything contained in the proposed 8th principle is already present in the existing 1st and 7th principles when they are deeply enough understood. But I think that this misses the point. The question is not whether Unitarian Universalism implicitly supports racial justice as one of many expressions of its essential values. That has always been true, although we have not always lived up to it fully. Here's what the advocates from Blue say. UUs and the UUA have done very good work in fighting racism, such as during the Civil Rights Movement and in the 1990s, passing a resolution in 1997 at GA to become an anti-racist, anti-oppression, multicultural organization. But the funding and support started to wane in the 2000s. Our accountability mechanisms failed us. UUs also have a mixed record historically in other areas of racial justice. For instance, we had people on both sides of abolitionism, including people like Jefferson, who was a slaveholder, and Unitarians were proponents of eugenics, leading to some of the racial extremes of Nazism and apartheid in South Africa. For people identified as white, it is too easy to ignore these issues, which is exactly what keeps the system of racism in our society alive, and in fact worsening right now. Blue continues, we need to decenter whiteness and other dominant cultures within UUism. The 8th principle came from a feeling that we need something to renew our commitment to this work, to hold ourselves accountable, and to fulfill the potential of our existing principles. The truth is that people racialized as white can always let go of race equity work whenever our bodies start to tell us that what we do, say, think, care about, believe in, or yearn for is being threatened. No matter that some of that may be rooted in the very white privilege we are consciously trying to dismantle. We can't help that instinctive flinch, the guilt, the defensiveness, the physical weariness that invites us to give up. What we have a choice about is the institutional structures that we have put in place to call us onward anyway. What the eighth principle might do for us as Unitarian Universalists is to normalize the discomfort of leaning in to recognize our own privilege and to remember the trauma of others who never can let go of the work because of what our society says the color of their bodies means. If we could say to those who might help hold us accountable, and to ourselves and to each other, it's going to be hard, and we're going to be tired, but we promised. We promised each other and ourselves and the future that this is a necessary part of what our faith means in the world, that only diverse, multicultural, beloved community will do, even when we dominant culture folks have to figure out how to be okay without being constantly at the center of everything. You know, people of color have no choice but to be conscious of their racial trauma all the time because they carry it in their bodies and communities. What if white UUs would choose, as an act of faith, to be that constant in our communities of historic privilege with our attention and witness and action? Maybe, just maybe, our white bodies would at some point learn that not being always at the center and not having special privilege isn't actually the threat it once felt like. Maybe we could figure out how to metabolize our trauma response in communities of commitment and become free for the work of building that beloved community. Maybe then we would truly be on our way, at last, to the freedom land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
To the freedom land.
to the freedom land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
To the freedom land.
to the freedom land.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way
To the freedom land.
to the freedom land.
I'm on my way. Great God, I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
I asked my church folk.
I ask my church folk,
Come and go with me.
come and go with me.
I asked my church folk.
I ask my church
Come and go with
folk,
me.
come and go with me.
I asked my church folk.
I ask my church folk,
Come and go with me.
come and go with me.
I'm on my way.
On my
Thank God,
way.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
If they say no,
If they say no,
I'll go anyhow.
I'll go anyhow.
If they say no,
If they say no,
I'll go anyhow.
I'll go anyhow.
If they say no,
If they say no,
I'll go anyhow.
I'll go anyhow.
I'm on my way.
on my
Great
way.
God, I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
And I won't turn back.
And I won't turn back.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
And I won't turn back.
And I won't turn back.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
And I won't turn back.
And I won't turn back. I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
I'm on my way.
We release this flame, sending the light of truth and the warmth of community and the fires of commitment out into the world. And these we carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. In his Prayers for Dark People, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote, "Let the prayer of our souls be a petition for persistence, not for the one good deed or the single high thought, but deed upon deed and thought upon thought, until day calling unto day shall make a life worth living." So be it.
He has a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works